The year 1898 clung to the small, isolated town of Oakhaven like a persistent fog, heavy with unspoken histories and the scent of pine needles damp from eternal twilight. Nestled deep within the Appalachian foothills, Oakhaven was a place where progress arrived slowly, if at all, and old beliefs, like stubborn weeds, thrived in the shadows of forgotten truths. It was a town of weathered faces and hushed conversations, a place where secrets festered beneath a veneer of rural simplicity. Our protagonist, Elias Thorne, was an anomaly in Oakhaven. A pragmatic and meticulously logical man, Elias was a traveling cartographer, his life dedicated to mapping the unseen and charting the unknown. His arrival in Oakhaven was purely professional, a commission to survey the expanding timberlands that fringed the town. Yet, from the moment his buggy wheels crunched on the unpaved main street, an unsettling feeling settled in his gut. The air was thick with an unnameable tension, a collective unease that seemed to emanate from every clapboard house and every averted gaze. His first night at the dilapidated Oakhaven Inn was punctuated by the rhythmic creaking of the floorboards above and the distant, mournful howl of a lone wolf. Sleep eluded him, his mind replaying the strange encounter he'd had earlier with Martha, the innkeeper. Her eyes, sunken and shadowed, had held a flicker of something akin to fear when he'd inquired about the town's history. "Oakhaven keeps its secrets close, Mr. Thorne," she'd mumbled, her voice barely a whisper, as if the very walls had ears. The following morning, Elias set about his work, instruments clanking in his leather satchel. As he surveyed the outskirts, drawing intricate lines on his parchment, he couldn't help but notice the peculiar absence of children playing in the dusty lanes. The few he did see were quickly pulled indoors by their mothers, their faces pale and their eyes wide with a fear Elias couldn't yet comprehend. It was a quietness that was unnatural, heavy, as if the town itself held its breath. He decided to visit the local parish, hoping to find some records, perhaps a town registry, that could offer insight into Oakhaven's demographic oddities. Father Michael, a gaunt man with a perpetual tremor in his hands, greeted him with a reluctant smile. The church, like everything else in Oakhaven, felt ancient and weary, the air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten incense. "Welcome to Oakhaven, Mr. Thorne," Father Michael said, his voice raspy. "What brings a man of your profession to our humble town?" Elias explained his purpose, then subtly steered the conversation. "I've noticed the town seems quieter than most. Are there many families here?" Father Michael's eyes darted towards the stained glass window, depicting a serene landscape. A long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Finally he spoke, his voice barely audible. "There were children once, a long time ago. Twins they were. Born under a shadow, the villagers said." Elias's professional curiosity was piqued. Twins? What kind of shadow? The priest hesitated, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple despite the cool air. A darkness. They were different. The village believed them cursed, a heavy burden for their poor mother. "And their names? Are there birth records of them here?" Elias pressed, pulling out a small notebook. Father Michael's hand went to his throat, a nervous gesture. No records. It was a time of great distress. Some things are best left forgotten, Mr. Thorne, especially in Oakhaven. His eyes, now wide with an almost desperate plea, met Elias's. "Please do not delve into the past. It holds only sorrow." Elias, though respectful of the priest's discomfort, felt a chilling current run down his spine. No records of birth? In a town as small and insular as Oakhaven, such an omission was not merely unusual. It was deeply unsettling. The priest's fear was palpable, and it wasn't the fear of a man protecting privacy, but of a man guarding a terrible, buried truth. The whispers about cursed twins, the palpable tension, the missing children, And now, the complete absence of any official record of these births. A sinister puzzle was beginning to form in Elias's mind. He had stumbled upon a truth the village desperately wanted to keep hidden. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. And remember, this is a work of fiction. The priest's warning only fueled Elias's determination. His cartographer's mind, accustomed to uncovering hidden paths and overlooked details, saw the missing birth records not as an absence, but as a glaring omission that pointed to something significant. The very resistance he encountered became a signpost, guiding him deeper into Oakhaven's shadowed history. He returned to the inn, the late afternoon sun casting long, distorted shadows across the deserted streets. Martha, the innkeeper, was tidying the small common room, her back to him. Elias cleared his throat, and she jumped, a small gasp escaping her lips. "Mr. Thorne, you startled me." Her hand flew to her chest, her eyes wide. "My apologies, Martha. I was just wondering if you might know anything more about the local history," Elias began, choosing his words carefully. "Father Michael mentioned a tale of twins long ago." Martha froze, her hands clutching the dust rag. Her face, already pale, seemed to drain of all color. "Twins," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "There are stories, yes. Old stories." She wouldn't meet his gaze, instead focusing intensely on a spot on the wooden floor. "He said they were believed to be cursed," Elias continued, observing her reaction closely, "and that there are no records of their birth." A shiver ran through Martha's thin frame. She finally looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate weariness. "Some things are best left undisturbed, Mr. Thorne. The past, it can be a cruel thing." She wrung the rag in her hands, her knuckles white. It brought nothing but sorrow to this town. Elias pressed gently. "But what sorrow? What happened to them? The twins?" Martha wrung her hands. They vanished. One day they were here, the next, gone, like the mist." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "But some say they never truly left, that their presence still lingers, a dark cloud over Oakhaven." She glanced around nervously, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "They say if you listen closely on a windy night, you can hear them crying." Elias, a man of science, dismissed the supernatural elements, but the core of her story, the vanished twins, the collective fear, resonated deeply. "Who were their parents?" he asked. Martha recoiled slightly. "Their mother, poor Ilara. She never recovered. She left Oakhaven shortly after. Couldn't bear the whispers, the looks." A profound sadness settled on her face. Her husband, he stayed for a while, a broken man. Then he too faded away. Oakhaven has a way of swallowing people whole, Mr. Thorne. This was new information. A mother, driven away by whispers and grief, and a father who faded away. Elias decided to approach the mystery from a different angle. "Martha, do you happen to have an old attic? Or maybe some forgotten storage space here at the inn? Sometimes old records, ledgers, or even personal belongings get left behind." Martha hesitated, her gaze drifting towards the ceiling. "There's an attic, yes. Been locked for years, full of dusty things. Nothing of interest, I assure you." "May I see it?" Elias asked, his tone polite but firm. "Sometimes old maps or surveying documents end up in forgotten places. It might help my work." He saw the flicker of apprehension in her eyes, but his professional demeanor seemed to offer a plausible excuse. After a moment of internal debate, Martha sighed. "Very well, but I warn you, it's just old junk." She retrieved a heavy, ornate iron key from a hook behind the counter. "Be careful. The stairs are steep." The attic door, located at the end of a narrow, dimly lit hallway on the second floor, creaked open with a groan that seemed to echo the inn's age. A wave of musty air, laden with the scent of dust, decaying paper, and something else Elias couldn't quite place, washed over him. The single grimy window barely allowed any light in, forcing Elias to light his lantern. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a chaotic jumble of forgotten furniture, trunks, and covered objects. As Elias stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under his weight. He began to systematically search, moving old blankets and stacks of newspapers. The silence was profound, broken only by the scurrying of unseen mice and the beating of his own heart. He found nothing related to his cartography work, but tucked away in a corner, beneath a pile of moth-eaten tapestries, he discovered a small wooden chest. It was old and unadorned, seemingly insignificant. He knelt, his fingers tracing the worn wood. The lid was unlocked. He slowly lifted it, and the inside revealed not maps or ledgers, but a handful of child's toys, a wooden soldier missing an arm, a faded rag doll with one button eye and a tarnished silver locket. He picked up the locket. It was cold to the touch. With a click, it opened, revealing two miniature sepia-toned photographs. One showed a young woman with a gentle yet sorrowful expression, presumably Elara. The other, however, sent a jolt through Elias. It was a photograph of two small children, no older than 5 or 6, twins. Their faces were strikingly similar, with wide, dark eyes that held an unnerving intensity. They weren't smiling. Their expressions were strangely vacant, almost melancholic. Beneath the locket, folded neatly, was a single yellowed letter. Elias carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was delicate, spidery, and almost illegible in places. It was a letter addressed to "My dearest Elara," dated years ago. The words were a desperate plea, filled with anguish and a profound sense of loss. It spoke of the children, the whispers, and the unbearable truth. But what truly caught Elias's attention was a single line, underlined multiple times. They weren't born cursed, Elara. They were born different. And Oakhaven couldn't bear it. Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the attic's damp air. The letter alluded to a truth, something beyond the simple narrative of a curse. Different. What did that mean? And what couldn't Oakhaven bear? He looked again at the unsettling photograph of the twins, their vacant eyes seeming to stare out from the past. The dust motes danced in the lantern light, and a faint, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to drift from the corners of the attic, like a mournful sigh. Elias knew then that he had unearthed more than just forgotten trinkets. He had found the first thread in a deeply woven tapestry of Oakhaven's dark secret. The letter from the attic burned in Elias's pocket, its words echoing in his mind. They weren't born cursed, Elara. They were born different, and Oakhaven couldn't bear it. This single sentence had cracked open the placid surface of the village's narrative, hinting at a truth far more complex and perhaps more horrifying than a simple curse. The photograph of the unsmiling twins, their eyes holding that unsettling vacancy, was seared into his memory. He needed to find someone who had been in Oakhaven at that time, someone who might know what different truly meant. His thoughts immediately turned to the town's oldest resident, Dr. Albright. Though long retired and frail, the old doctor was rumored to have been a pillar of the community for decades, a man who had seen generations born and buried. He was Oakhaven's de facto historian, a quiet observer of its slow decay. Elias found Dr. Albright's small, dilapidated cottage on the outskirts of town, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. A faint light flickered within. He knocked gently on the weathered door. After a long moment, it creaked open, revealing a stooped figure leaning heavily on a cane. Dr. Albright's eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharp, intelligent glint. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line seemingly etched by time and a lifetime of shared sorrows. "Mr. Thorne, isn't it?" "Doctor." Albright's voice was surprisingly clear, though a little reedy. "Martha at the inn mentioned a cartographer. Come in, come in. It's a cold evening." The cottage interior was cluttered with books and medical instruments, a testament to a life devoted to knowledge and healing. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and something vaguely medicinal. Elias settled into a creaking armchair by a small, sputtering fire. "Dr. Albright," Elias began, choosing his words carefully, "I've been making inquiries about the history of Oakhaven, specifically about a pair of twins, born many years ago." A visible tremor ran through the old doctor's hand, which rested on his cane. He slowly turned his gaze to the flickering fire, his eyes distant. "Ah, the twins," he murmured, his voice laced with a profound sadness. "A tragedy, that. A heavy burden for this town." "I understand they were said to be cursed," Elias continued, "but I found something that suggested otherwise. A letter indicating they were different and that Oakhaven couldn't bear it." Dr. Albright sighed, a long, weary exhalation. "The letter was from Ilara's husband, I presume? Joseph. He was a good man, heartbroken. He never understood why, never truly believed the village's superstitions." He paused, lost in thought. "The truth, Mr. Thorne, is far more complex than a simple curse, and far more disturbing." Elias leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Please, Dr. Albright, tell me what happened. What made them different?" The doctor closed his eyes for a moment, as if steeling himself. "They were born without emotion, Mr. Thorne, or rather they appeared to be. Their faces were perpetually blank, devoid of joy, sorrow, anger, fear. Nothing. They never cried, never laughed. They spoke in a monotone, even as infants. It was unsettling, profoundly so. Imagine a child, a baby, looking at you with eyes that hold no warmth, no flicker of human connection." Elias felt a cold dread creep up his spine. "No emotions? But that's extraordinary. A medical anomaly? Indeed, I had never seen anything like it. Their physical development was normal, perhaps even accelerated. They were strong, healthy, but their interactions, they were like automatons. They observed, they imitated, but they never felt. They didn't seem to understand the nuances of human interaction. A smile, a frown, a comforting touch. It meant nothing to them. They were like empty vessels. And the villagers, they saw this as a curse. Of course, in a place like Oakhaven, where understanding is limited and fear thrives, anything outside the norm is labeled as evil, as an affront to God. They saw the children's blank stares as a sign of demonic possession. The whispers started almost immediately. Unnatural. Soulless. The devil's spawn. Dr. Albright's voice grew heavier, tinged with regret. Their mother, Ilara, tried to love them. Truly she did. But even she struggled. How do you connect with a child who offers no emotional response? It broke her heart, piece by painful piece. And the children themselves? How did they react to the villagers' fear? Elias asked, picturing the unnerving photograph. They didn't, the doctor replied, a chilling note in his voice. That was the most terrifying part. The fear, the ostracization, the cruelty, it had no discernible effect on them. They were immune to it. They would simply observe, those wide, blank eyes taking everything in. It was as if they were studying us, studying human behavior, but from a detached clinical distance. It fueled the villagers' terror even more. How could one punish or control something that felt no pain, no remorse, no fear? Dr. Albright leaned forward, his gaze piercing Elias's. And then, things began to happen. Small things at first. Livestock found dead in unusual ways, tools disappearing from barns, unsettling noises at night. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, but the village, already primed by fear, attributed it all to the twins. They were seen as harbingers of misfortune, the cause of every ill. But were they? Elias pressed, his voice barely a whisper. Did they do anything? The old doctor looked away, his eyes fixed on some unseen point in the room. I cannot say for certain. What I can tell you is this. The fear in Oakhaven reached a fever pitch. People were afraid to leave their homes after dark. Parents held their children close. The whispers turned into shouts, then threats. It was an hysteria, and then they vanished. How? Elias asked, the silence in the room pressing in on him. No one knows, Dr. Albright stated, his voice flat. One morning, they were simply gone, their small bed empty. Ilara was inconsolable, convinced they had been taken, or worse. The village breathed a collective sigh of relief, though they pretended to mourn. They wanted them gone. They believed the curse had finally lifted. And their parents? Ilara left Oakhaven, as I said. Joseph, her husband, stayed for a time, searching, hoping. But he eventually gave up, his spirit broken. He left town a year later, never to be heard from again. Doctor, Albright sighed again, a sound heavy with years of unspoken grief. The village buried the story, Mr. Thorne. Buried it deep. They rewrote their own history, transforming a complex medical anomaly and societal fear into a simple tale of a curse lifted. It was easier to believe that than face the truth of what they had done, or perhaps what they had allowed to happen. Elias felt a profound chill. The story was far darker than he had anticipated. Not a supernatural curse, but a chilling psychological drama rooted in fear, ignorance, and perhaps something far more sinister. The vacant eyes in the photograph, the lack of emotion, the mysterious disappearance, it all painted a picture of a profound, unsolved mystery. He realized the twins hadn't merely vanished, they had been eradicated, their very existence wiped from the town's memory, because Oakhaven couldn't face what they represented. But the question remained, what truly happened to them? And was it possible that the curse was not the twins, but the town itself? The doctor's words resonated deeply within Elias, each detail painting a more unsettling picture of Oakhaven. The narrative of the cursed twins, born devoid of human emotion, ostracized and then vanished, was a chilling testament to collective fear and ignorance. Elias, ever the pragmatist, was convinced there was a logical, albeit disturbing, explanation for their disappearance. The village had wished them gone, and in such an isolated community, wishes sometimes had a terrible way of manifesting. He spent the next few days continuing his mapping work, but his senses were heightened, his perception sharpened by the insidious undercurrents of Oakhaven. He noticed the lingering glances, the quick retreats behind closed curtains when he walked by. It wasn't just suspicion. It was a deep-seated fear, a collective guilt that permeated every interaction. The silence of the town, once merely an observation, now felt like a heavy blanket, stifling any attempt at open conversation. One afternoon, as he surveyed a remote patch of forest bordering the town, Elias stumbled upon a clearing. In its center stood a dilapidated, half-collapsed cabin, almost swallowed by the encroaching wilderness. It was clearly abandoned, its windows shattered, its door hanging precariously from a single hinge. A shiver ran down Elias's spine. Could this have been their home? He approached cautiously, the air growing colder as he neared the structure. The silence here was different from the town's, a profound, watchful quiet, as if the very trees held their breath. He pushed open the rickety door, stepping into a single dust-filled room. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of decay and something else. Something indescribably unsettling, like old, forgotten grief. The cabin was sparsely furnished, a broken table, a stool, and a rickety bed frame. But what drew Elias's attention were the walls. They were covered in charcoal drawings. Crude, childlike, yet disturbingly detailed. They depicted stick figures with blank faces, large dark eyes surrounded by smaller, frightened figures. Some drawings showed the blank-faced figures observing, others showed them interacting with animals, but always with that same unnerving emotional detachment. One drawing in particular made Elias's blood run cold. It showed two blank-faced figures standing over a fallen animal, their hands outstretched, but with no expression of remorse or understanding. It was a depiction of pure clinical observation. These had to be the twins' drawings. The realization that they had lived in this desolate place, documenting their world through their unique, detached lens, sent a wave of unease through him. He imagined them, two small figures, silently moving through this cabin, observing the world with those unnerving, empty eyes. As he examined the drawings, a faint glint caught his eye from beneath a loose floorboard. He pried it open with his surveying knife. Inside, wrapped in a piece of faded cloth, was a small, crudely carved wooden doll. It had no facial features, just smooth blank wood where a face should be. Next to it was a small, worn, leather-bound journal. Elias carefully picked up the journal. The cover was blank. He opened it, and the pages were filled with neat, precise handwriting, but not the spidery hand of Elara, nor the more masculine script of Joseph. This handwriting was different, almost scientific in its meticulousness. The entries were dated from years ago, coinciding with the period of the twins' disappearance. The first entry read, "Day 1. The subjects are proving fascinating. Their emotional deficit, as the local physician terms it, is far more profound than I anticipated. They exhibit no empathy, no fear, no discernible response to pain or pleasure. Their cognitive abilities, however, appear highly developed. They are learning at an astonishing rate." Elias's blood ran cold. Subjects, learning. This wasn't a family journal. This was an observation log. He flipped through the pages, his heart pounding in his chest. The entries continued, detailing the twins' behavior, their interactions with their environment, their rapid absorption of information. The author described experiments. Presented with a small injury, subject A displayed no distress, only a clinical curiosity in the wound. Or, subject B replicated a complex task after observing it only once, with perfect accuracy. The journal's tone was cold, clinical, devoid of any human warmth. It was the detached observation of a scientist. And then Elias found a section that made his breath catch in his throat. It described the village's increasing fear, the rising hysteria, and the author's plan to relocate the subjects for their own safety and for the continuation of my research. The last entry was dated the exact day the twins were said to have vanished. The relocation was successful. Oakhaven can continue its deluded existence, believing a curse has been lifted. They will never know the true nature of their affliction. The subjects are now secure, and our work can proceed undisturbed. They are not cursed. They are simply the next step. Elias stumbled back, the journal falling from his trembling hands. The next step. The words echoed in the silence of the abandoned cabin. This wasn't a natural anomaly or a simple tragedy of fear. Someone had been studying the twins, manipulating events, and then orchestrating their disappearance under the guise of the village's superstition. This was no curse. It was a calculated abduction. But by whom, and for what purpose? He looked at the crude drawings on the wall, the blank faces, the watchful eyes. He looked at the doll with no features. The chilling realization dawned on him. The twins weren't just observed. They were taken. And the unseen watchers Martha spoke of weren't ghosts, but something far more tangible, far more terrifying. Elias was no longer merely mapping timberlands. He was charting a human experiment, a conspiracy hidden beneath layers of fear and superstition. He knew he was now dangerously close to a truth that Oakhaven, and perhaps others, wanted buried forever. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. And remember, this is a work of fiction. The journal was a chilling revelation, confirming Elias's growing suspicions. The twins weren't cursed, nor did they simply vanish into the mist. They were taken. The entries, cold and scientific, spoke of subjects and research, implying a deliberate, calculated agenda behind their disappearance. But who was the author? And what was the true nature of this next step they alluded to? Elias clutched the journal, his mind racing. He had to find the author. The meticulous handwriting, the clinical tone. It suggested someone educated, perhaps even a physician, given the reference to the local physician. His thoughts immediately returned to Dr. Albright. Could the old doctor, a man who spoke with such apparent regret, be involved? The idea was disturbing, yet the pieces seemed to fit, however uncomfortably. He returned to Oakhaven, the journal carefully concealed beneath his coat. The town, once merely quiet, now felt menacing, every shadow potentially hiding an unseen observer. He knew he had to approach Dr. Albright with extreme caution. The doctor had shared information, but had he shared all of it? His evasiveness about the specific nature of the twins' difference now seemed less like discomfort and more like a deliberate omission. Elias found Dr. Albright at his cottage, sitting by the fire, a book open on his lap. The old man looked up, his eyes seeming to pierce through Elias as if reading his very thoughts. "You've been out in the woods, Mr. Thorne," he observed, his voice devoid of its usual tremor. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Elias chose his words carefully, observing the doctor's subtle reactions. "I found a cabin, doctor, an abandoned one, and inside I found this." He slowly produced the journal, laying it on the small table between them. "Doctor," Albright's eyes, previously sharp, widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something Elias couldn't quite identify, surprise, recognition, fear, crossed his face before settling into a carefully composed neutrality. "A journal," he stated, his voice flat. "Old things often turn up in old cabins." "This isn't just any old thing, Doctor," Elias countered, his gaze unwavering. "This journal speaks of subjects, of research, and of the relocation of the twins, not their disappearance. It's dated to the exact time they vanished. And the handwriting, Doctor, it is remarkably similar to yours." Dr. Albright remained silent, his gaze fixed on the journal. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension. The flickering fire cast dancing shadows, making the doctor's already aged features seem gaunt and almost skeletal. "The author describes the twins as being the next step, Doctor," Elias continued, pressing his advantage. "What did you mean by that? And why was it so important to keep their existence and your involvement a secret?" Finally, Dr. Albright lifted his head, his eyes meeting Elias's with an unnerving intensity. The weariness that usually defined him seemed to melt away, replaced by a cold, clinical resolve. "You are a perceptive man, Mr. Thorne, more perceptive than most who wander into Oakhaven." He sighed, a sound that held no remorse, only a profound sense of resignation. "Yes, the journal is mine. And yes, I was the one who located the twins." Elias felt a surge of both shock and confirmation. "Why, Doctor?" What right did you have to take them from their family? Right? Dr. Albright scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. What right did Oakhaven have to condemn them, to ostracize them, to drive their mother to despair and their father to ruin? They were children, Mr. Thorne, children who possessed a unique and extraordinary neurological condition. They lacked empathy, yes, but they were also incredibly intelligent, capable of processing information at an unprecedented rate. They were, in essence, a new form of human consciousness. A clean slate, unburdened by the emotional complexities that plague our species. And you decided to exploit that? Elias accused, a knot forming in his stomach. Exploit? Dr. Albright's voice rose, a hint of indignation in his tone. I decided to understand, to nurture, to study. The village would have destroyed them, Mr. Thorne, either through direct violence born of fear or through the slow, agonizing death of neglect and isolation. I offered them a chance for me to understand them, and perhaps for them to understand us in their own way. So you abducted them, Elias stated, the truth stark and undeniable. I saved them, Dr. Albright corrected, his eyes burning with conviction. I staged their disappearance. I allowed the village to believe their absurd curse had been lifted. It was for the greater good, Mr. Thorne, for science, for the future of humanity. Where are they now? Elias demanded, his voice tight. Dr. Albright paused, his gaze drifting to the window, where the last vestiges of twilight faded into night. Far from Oakhaven, far from the superstitions and ignorance that would have snuffed out their unique spark. They are in a place where their potential can be realized, where they can be observed without prejudice, without fear. And who is with them? Elias pressed. Are you alone in this research? A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the doctor's lips, a chilling expression devoid of warmth. I have collaborators, Mr. Thorne. Like-minded individuals who understand the profound implications of what these children represent. We are a collective, dedicated to understanding the nuances of the human mind and perhaps guiding its evolution. Elias felt a profound sense of dread. What kind of evolution, Doctor? What exactly are you doing to them? We are teaching them, observing them, allowing them to develop free from the constraints of societal norms and emotional attachments. We are exploring the boundaries of human cognition, the potential of a mind unburdened by sentimentality. Imagine, Mr. Thorne, a world where decisions are made purely by logic, where progress is unhindered by emotional weakness. The doctor's words were a chilling echo of a detached, almost inhuman philosophy. Elias suddenly realized the full scope of the doctor's ambition and the terrifying implications of his research. He wasn't just observing. He was attempting to shape these unique individuals into something new, something that defied conventional understanding of humanity. And what happens when your subjects reach their full potential, Doctor? Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. What then? Dr. Albright's eyes in the dim light of the cottage seemed to gleam with a disturbing zeal. Then, Mr. Thorne, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, then we will truly see the next step for humanity, and Oakhaven in its ignorance will have played its unwitting part in the grand design. Elias felt a cold dread that surpassed anything he had experienced in Oakhaven. He had walked into a web woven not by ghosts or curses, but by a chillingly rational yet deeply disturbing scientific ambition. The twins were not merely taken, they were instruments in a grand and potentially terrifying experiment. And Elias, by uncovering this truth, had now placed himself in a precarious position. The architect of Oakhaven's silence had revealed himself, and the secret he guarded was far more dangerous than any village superstition. The chilling conversation with Dr. Albright left Elias reeling. The doctor's calm, almost serene confession of abducting the twins for scientific observation was profoundly unsettling. His philosophy, detached and devoid of empathy, painted a terrifying picture of a man who saw human beings as mere components in a grand, impersonal experiment. Elias understood now that the curse was a meticulously crafted cover story, an elaborate smokescreen designed to protect the doctor's illicit research. He left Dr. Albright's cottage under the cloak of night, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. The silent streets of Oakhaven seemed to mock him, every creak of the old buildings, every rustle of leaves, a whisper of the hidden truth. He was no longer just a cartographer, he was an unwilling participant in a dark secret, and the knowledge he possessed put him in grave danger. Dr. Albright was not alone, he had collaborators. Who were they, and how far did their influence extend? Elias decided his immediate priority was to contact outside authorities, but in 1898, in a remote Appalachian town, law enforcement was sparse and unreliable. He couldn't risk arousing suspicion, not yet. He needed more proof, concrete evidence of the twins' current location and the nature of the research before he could act. The next morning, Elias feigned interest in local geological formations, using his surveying equipment as a pretext to explore the surrounding wilderness more thoroughly. He reasoned that if the twins were secure and their potential realized, they had to be somewhere relatively close, yet isolated. He meticulously charted old trails, examined unusual rock formations, and searched for any signs of human activity beyond the usual logging operations. The air was crisp, the scent of pine strong, but the beauty of the landscape was marred by the underlying dread. Days turned into a week. Elias's interactions with the villagers remained strained, their fear of him now tinged with an unspoken accusation, as if they sensed his inquiries were disturbing their carefully constructed peace. Martha at the inn became even more evasive, her eyes constantly darting around, her hands trembling as she served his meals. During his solitary explorations, Elias kept returning to the concept of the next step that Dr. Albright had mentioned. What would emotionless humans, developed purely by logic, truly be capable of? The idea was both fascinating and terrifying. He imagined children who could solve complex problems, analyze data, and learn at an incredible pace, but without the constraints of compassion, fear, or morality. It was a chilling thought, a vision of an intellectual marvel devoid of humanity. One afternoon, while trekking through a particularly dense part of the forest, far from any established paths, Elias noticed a faint, almost invisible track. It was too regular for an animal trail, too defined for a mere deer path. It was a barely discernible indentation in the moss and fallen leaves, a path rarely used but deliberately maintained. His cartographer's instinct screamed for him to follow it. He pushed through thick underbrush, ducking beneath low-hanging branches. The track led him deeper into the wilderness, away from Oakhaven, towards a hidden valley. The air grew still, the sounds of the forest muted, as if he was entering a different realm. After nearly an hour of arduous walking, the trees finally thinned, revealing a clearing. And there, nestled against the side of a steep, rocky incline, was not a cabin, but a structure unlike anything Elias had seen in the region. It was a modest, yet remarkably sturdy stone building, almost blending into the natural rock face. It had few windows, and those that existed were small and heavily barred. A single heavy wooden door, reinforced with iron bands, faced him. It wasn't a home, it was a fortress, a prison, or perhaps a laboratory. A wave of apprehension washed over Elias. This had to be it, the place where the twins were kept. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. There was no smoke from a chimney, no sign of obvious activity, yet a palpable sense of watchfulness permeated the air. He noticed subtle details, a freshly disturbed patch of earth near the entrance, suggesting recent digging. A faint, almost imperceptible metallic glint from a small crevice above the door. He circled the building, looking for any other entrance or weakness. The walls were thick, the construction precise, betraying a level of planning and resources far beyond what a solitary, reclusive doctor could achieve. This was the work of collaborators, a network of individuals. As he reached the back of the building, he noticed something else. A small, almost hidden ventilation shaft, too narrow for a person to enter, but wide enough for sounds to escape. He pressed his ear against it, straining to hear. At first, only the faint whisper of the wind, then a low, rhythmic hum, like machinery. And then, clearer, more distinct, he heard voices. Not children's voices, but adult ones. And what they were discussing sent a shiver of dread through his entire being. They were speaking in complex, scientific terms, discussing neural pathways, cognitive mapping, and behavioral algorithms. He heard phrases like Subject Alpha's remarkable progress and Subject Beta's latest analytical breakthrough. But what truly froze him was a sentence, spoken in a calm, almost excited tone. Their understanding of cause and effect, unclouded by emotional bias, is unparalleled. We are on the verge of demonstrating truly superior intellect. The final phase approaches. The final phase. Elias recoiled from the vent, his mind reeling. The twins weren't just being observed, they were being actively molded, trained, their unique lack of emotion being weaponized into a chillingly efficient form of intelligence. Dr. Albright and his collaborators weren't just scientists. They were architects of a new kind of human, one defined solely by cold, calculating logic. Elias backed away from the stone building, his fear now replaced by a chilling determination. He had found them. He had found the truth. But now the question shifted from what happened to what was happening now. And how could he stop it? He was one man against a clandestine network, hidden deep in the wilderness, pursuing an agenda that threatened the very definition of humanity. He realized the labyrinth of logic was not just within the twins, it was the cold, rational design of those who held them captive. The hidden stone laboratory and Elias's chilling discovery solidified his fears. Dr. Albright and his collaborators weren't just observing the twins, they were actively molding them, exploiting their unique neurology for what the doctor termed the next step. Elias felt a profound urgency. The final phase could mean anything, and with the doctor's detached philosophy, it likely boded ill for the twins and potentially society. He returned to Oakhaven, desperate for a plan. Local authorities were too provincial, perhaps too easily influenced by Dr. Albright. He needed to reach out beyond Oakhaven to prominent academics in New York, but getting a discreet message out of this isolated town would be challenging. Maintaining his cartography cover, Elias focused on identifying the doctor's network. He noticed a pattern. Every few weeks, a sophisticated buggy would arrive, bringing a well-dressed man who visited Dr. Albright. Martha, the innkeeper, was evasive about these business associates, but her palpable fear suggested more. One evening, Elias, unable to sleep, saw Father Michael heading towards Dr. Albright's cottage. Intrigued, Elias followed discreetly. He crept close to the cottage window, listening as a heated argument unfolded. "This cannot continue, Albert," Father Michael exclaimed, his voice tinged with anguish. "The villagers are restless. Your experiments are too ambitious." "Ambitious, Michael?" Dr. Albright's calm, cutting voice responded, "Or simply beyond your limited understanding. We are on the cusp of something monumental." Elias's blood ran cold. Albert. Father Michael, who had warned him away from the past, was a collaborator, actively involved in this chilling enterprise. His earlier warnings were merely to protect their secret. But the risks, Albert, the moral implications, "These are children you took from their home," Father Michael pleaded. "They were neglected, feared, and soon to be destroyed," Dr. Albright retorted, his voice rising. "I gave them purpose, and you, Michael, provided the necessary cover. Your curse narrative was invaluable." A wave of nausea washed over Elias. The priest, a man of God, was complicit in this elaborate deception, using superstition as a shield for a terrifying scientific agenda. This was a deeply ingrained conspiracy woven into Oakhaven's very fabric. "Their parents," Father Michael whimpered, "Elara, Joseph, they suffered. A necessary sacrifice for the advancement of knowledge," Dr. Albright stated coldly. "Sentimentality has no place in true scientific pursuit." Elias ducked as Father Michael drew the curtains shut. The implications sank in. The network was deeper, more insidious than he'd imagined, involving key figures within Oakhaven. He realized he was facing an unspoken conspiracy that had maintained its grip on the town for years. His only recourse was to escape and expose the operation from the outside, before the final phase came to its chilling conclusion. But getting out, he knew, might be far more dangerous than getting in. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. And remember, this is a work of fiction. Father Michael's complicity shattered Elias's remaining illusions. Oakhaven was deeply compromised, its spiritual leader a silent partner in a chilling experiment. The knowledge weighed on him, heavy and suffocating. He couldn't trust anyone in Oakhaven. Every move would be scrutinized. He needed to get the journal, the photograph, and his maps of the hidden laboratory out. His chance came on a Tuesday. Silas, an old timber wagon driver, made weekly trips to Blackwood, which had a telegraph office. Elias offered Silas a generous sum for discreet delivery of a package, then planned to follow on foot to create an alibi. Elias packed his essential documents, the journal, the locket, and his maps, into a waterproof satchel. He included a detailed letter for a renowned psychology professor in New York, a man known for his ethical stance. The 30-mile trek to Blackwood began before dawn, arduous and tense. Midway, Elias heard the distinct crunch of boots. He froze, melting into the dense undergrowth. Two figures emerged, Father Michael and a burly business associate of Dr. Albright. They were tracking him. A cold dread settled in Elias's stomach. How had they known? Had Silas betrayed him, or had he been more transparent than he thought? He listened to their hushed conversation. "Are you certain he has it, Father?" the burly man asked. "He carries it close," Father Michael replied, his voice cold and calculating. "The journal, the photograph. He's meticulous. The doctor insists this loose end be tied up before the final phase commences," the man continued. "Indeed," Father Michael agreed. "A necessary measure. The boy is too curious. He poses a threat to our research." Elias felt indignation mixed with terror. The boy. He was an obstacle to be removed. The network's ruthlessness was chilling. He heard them draw closer. Elias knew he couldn't outrun them in the rugged terrain. He spotted a steep, thorny ravine to his left, a perilous descent, but it offered cover. With a burst of adrenaline, he launched himself down the embankment, sliding and tumbling. Thorns tore at him, but he ignored the pain, hearing shouts from above as they pursued. At the bottom, gasping, he heard them descending. He had to get rid of the evidence. He unsealed the satchel, pulled out the journal and locket, and tucked them deep inside his coat. The maps and letter, less crucial now, he ripped into tiny pieces, scattering them into a muddy stream. He then crawled into a small, dark cave, barely large enough but offering concealment. "He went this way," the burly man shouted. "Find him, you fool!" Father Michael's voice was sharp. "He cannot escape with that journal." Elias huddled in the dark, the cold dampness seeping into his bones. He knew they wouldn't give up easily. He was a threat. The betrayal by Father Michael, the chilling pursuit, had stripped away any remaining naivete. He was fighting for his life, and for the remote chance of exposing a terrifying truth that Oakhaven had buried. The shadow of their betrayal was long, and it was closing in. Trapped in the small, damp cave, Elias listened to Father Michael and the burly man's frantic search. Their voices grew agitated, footsteps crashing just inches from his hiding spot. "He must be here," the burly man growled. "He couldn't have vanished." "Search every inch, you incompetent," Father Michael snapped. "The doctor will be furious." Elias pressed himself into the cold rock, clutching the journal and locket. His heart hammered. He knew they wouldn't stop until he was no longer a threat. He had to wait them out. Hours crawled by. The sun set, casting the ravine into shadows. The air grew colder, and mist rose. The search sounds became sporadic. Finally, as night deepened, Father Michael's resigned voice cut through. "He's gone, damn him. He must have found another way out. Return to Oakhaven. We will inform the doctor of this setback." Elias heard their footsteps receding. He waited for what felt like an eternity before cautiously crawling out. The ravine was dark, lit only by moonlight. Bruised, scratched, and exhausted, he was alive, and the journal and locket were safe. He couldn't return to Oakhaven. It was unsafe. He had to reach Blackwood. The walk would be perilous in the dark, but he had no choice. He set off, slow and careful, relying on his cartographer's instincts. Every sound made him jump. He was a hunted man. He walked for hours, pushing his limits, fueled by the twins' image and Dr. Albright's chilling words. Just as dawn broke, he stumbled upon Blackwood's outskirts. The distant lights were a beacon of hope. He reached the telegraph office as the operator opened. The grizzled man looked at his disheveled state. "Morning," he grunted. "You look like you wrestled a bear." "Something like that," Elias croaked. "I need to send a telegram. Urgently." He handed over his crumpled letter, addressed to a renowned New York professor. The operator's brow furrowed at the alarming content. "This is serious business, mister," he said. "You sure?" "Absolutely," Elias affirmed, placing the journal and locket on the counter. "This is proof. Ask the professor to contact law enforcement and come to Blackwood. I will wait here." The operator, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. "All right, mister. I'll send it. But you stay close. This ain't no ordinary telegram." Elias slumped into a chair, exhausted but relieved. The message was out. The truth, buried in Oakhaven, was finally on its way. But he knew Dr. Albright and his collaborators wouldn't give up. The final phase still loomed. By sending that telegram, Elias had declared war on a hidden network. The reckoning was coming, and it would be fought in the dark, where Oakhaven's secrets had festered for too long. Days passed agonizingly for Elias in Blackwood. He waited at the telegraph office, sleep-deprived and constantly on edge. The gruff operator, sensing the gravity, offered small kindnesses. On the third day, Professor Alistair Finch, a well-dressed man from New York, entered. "Mr. Thorne?" he asked, his eyes intelligent and tired. "That's me," Elias said, springing up. "Your telegram was alarming," Professor Finch stated, extending a hand. "The journal, unprecedented. I brought a colleague and local authorities." He gestured to two stern men and a uniformed sheriff. Elias quickly recounted his story. Oakhaven's whispers, the journal, the ravine pursuit. He presented the journal and locket as proof. Professor Finch listened grimly, while the sheriff and his men exchanged uneasy glances. "Dr. Albright," Professor Finch mused, "a brilliant, reclusive mind. I never imagined this. He believes he's creating a next step in human evolution," Elias explained, urgency in his voice. manipulating the twins, weaponizing their lack of emotion into chilling intelligence. He spoke of a final phase. Sheriff Brody stepped forward. A secret laboratory? Sounds like a tall tale, but his voice trembled. It's real, Sheriff, Elias insisted. I have maps. I overheard them. Father Michael is involved, using superstition as a smokescreen. Professor Finch nodded. This isn't just an ethics breach. It's abduction, illegal human experimentation, likely worse. He turned to Sheriff Brody. We must act now. We don't know what Albright plans. A small force was assembled. Sheriff Brody, deputies, and Professor Finch accompanied Elias back to Oakhaven under night's cover. The town was eerily quiet. Elias led them to Dr. Albright's cottage. They found the doctor calmly reading, showing no surprise, only a faint smile. Mr. Thorne, he said, I commend your tenacity, but you are too late. The final phase commenced this morning. Professor Finch stepped forward, angered. Dr. Albright, you are under arrest. Where are they? Albright chuckled, humorless. They are gone, Professor, far beyond your reach. They have moved on to their true destiny. No longer mere children, they are the future, unburdened by your primitive emotions. What have you done? Elias demanded. I simply provided the impetus for their next stage, Albright replied, his eyes gleaming. They are self-sufficient, independent, superior. Sheriff Brody ordered a search of the cottage, finding only medical instruments. The collaborators were gone. The laboratory, Elias urged, the stone building. Guided by Elias's maps, they reached the hidden laboratory. It was clean, spotless. Equipment was meticulously arranged, but the twins were gone. Signs of recent activity remained. Discarded vials, a faint metallic smell. On a central table lay a handwritten note to Dr. Albright in a precise, refined script Elias recognized from the journal, but more developed. The note read, Our thanks for your tutelage. We have learned all that was necessary from this environment. Our next phase requires different parameters. We embark on our own path now, unconstrained. The future awaits. It was signed, Alpha and Beta. Elias felt a profound chill. The twins weren't just taken. They had been trained. And now, having absorbed all they could, they had moved on. They had orchestrated their own departure, a chilling testament to their enhanced capabilities and utter lack of emotion. They were not victims. They were something else entirely. Dr. Albright, standing in his dismantled lab, looked almost proud. They learned quickly, didn't they? Far surpassing my expectations, they are truly the next step. The sheriff arrested Dr. Albright, who offered no resistance, seeming serene. The professor looked disturbed. This is unprecedented, he murmured. The ethical implications, the potential. The story of Oakhaven and its cursed twins slowly unraveled. Dr. Albright was tried. His chilling confessions, Elias's testimony, and the journal painting a disturbing picture. The truth, stripped of superstition, was far more unsettling. Oakhaven, scarred, slowly healed. Villagers confronted their complicity. Father Michael, exposed, disappeared. Elias Thorne became a reluctant hero. The experience changed him profoundly, showing him the thin line between ambition and moral decay. The twins, Alpha and Beta, were never found. Their existence became a chilling urban legend, a whisper among scientists about human potential. They were not cursed. They were simply different. And in their cold, logical pursuit of their next step, they left humanity to wonder what future awaited, shaped by minds that felt no fear, no love, and no remorse. The final reckoning for Oakhaven had arrived, but the true consequences of Dr. Albright's experiment, unleashed, remained an unnerving, unsolved mystery. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling tales. And remember, this is a work of fiction.